Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe. And before we dive into this week's fantastic episode, as always, we'd like to say thank you to all of our amazing patrons, especially this week to our new patron, Terry Beth Raw. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey and adventure and supporting this podcast. We are so grateful. And if you would like to join Terry Beth and all of our other wonderful patrons, please pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, where you can get an insane amount. Like, we're talking, you know how like all these streaming services, they're all like, you know, stuff's dropping off all the time, like, you know, 2 weeks to do this, 1 week, and they're all getting like, we've got more stuff than Netflix now, haven't we, when you think about it? I reckon.
Not sure we have, but, you know, let's go with it. Yeah, let's roll with that. Yeah.
Start to feel like it. You know that moment where you start to lose count of all of the exclusive bonus material, you know, that it's at that point now, isn't it?
A lot of goodies. It's a lot of goodies, yeah.
We couldn't even spend an entire episode listing off all of the specialist interviews and deep dives that we've got for everyone that supports us. So please do consider it, folks. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you would like to help continue every week what we do, that would be fantastic. So, Mr. Stay, how are you keeping, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I had a head cold last week, so if I suddenly start, coughing my guts up, that's why. But I'll try not to do that. I'll try and mute myself if that happens. But yeah, no, it's all good. I'm still. Unwelcome is now out to buy digitally in the UK. So, you know, if you go to Apple or Amazon or Sky or whoever you get your digital downloads from, you can buy it. It's going to be able to, you can rent it from the 13th, Monday 13th. And then in the States, it's going to be in theatres from the 8th of March. I think it's a very limited release. And then on digital from the 14th of March. And I think 14th of March might be where we start seeing it crop up all over the world, because I had my friend Julian Barr in Australia said, it's coming on digital 14th of March in Oz. So go to, Apple, Amazon, or wherever you get your digital movie downloads from, and you'll probably start seeing it crop up there, because I really want people to see it so we can do like a proper spoiler special with questions from listeners and stuff like that, because people are asking me questions, particularly about the ending, mostly that start with what the
I've got some questions about the ending, Mark. I've been holding back, but we will explore
yes,
that.
we will explore.
I saw you finally got credited on IMDb as well.
I've got an internet movie database.
You have. Yeah, you've got two.
Well, this is the crazy thing. I didn't even realize I was on IMDb. Like, well, I don't know if this is like one of these like bucket list, like badge of honors things, but yeah. Weirdly enough, number of years ago, I went and so Stephen Barton, who's a guy that I started writing music with years ago, who worked on the Narnia films, did a lot of music for Narnia and Shrek. He worked on the Shrek movies. Composer, Hollywood film composer, did a lot of like major video games. Like he did the music for Skyrim and some massive games.
Wow.
But anyway, he invited me along to a session where they were filming. They were actually recording an orchestra for a movie. And started dabbling around and helping out. And he gave me a scoring assistant credit, which was bonkers. But I've got to say, my pride and joy is having a credit on Welcome. Official. I think I'm now going to start a career, Mark, as a professional voice actor now. I think.
Let's not spoil it, because people won't,
They won't.
Oh, yeah.
They don't know necessarily where you come in.
Than that.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Well, but the other thing is, okay, so what I will say there, and I have seen the movie and I absolutely loved it. It was the surrealist night of my life. It was absolutely brilliant. Went to London, watched it at Leicester Square. But I think what we're going to do, Mark, is next week, the week before the movie, we'll run a competition for a couple of audiobooks of Back to Reality for who can find the most number of bestseller experiment Easter eggs that you've slipped in this massive movie from Warner, because you know what I mean, that's got to be a first. A podcast jokes, so because I actually don't think I found all of them, but I think we'll have a little competition next week. We'll talk about it. So if you want to do that, one, it'll mean you'll have to watch the movie, which is great. Yep. But secondly, we'll have
watch it more than once.
Watch it more than once, because the other thing is, some of these are probably unintentional. There's a couple that are there's definite intent. I thought people will like the people who know this, and I've already had people say there's a couple of lines where they laughed out loud and everyone else in the cinema is going, "What's wrong with you?
Why is that so funny?" I know. Well, I've got to tell you something, Mark. When I went to see it, as I mentioned, we went to Leicester Square. We went large. We went on the opening night. It was brilliant. I obviously stayed to the very end, watched all the credits and listened to the music, and everyone else stayed in the theatre. No one else left until which is unusual because usually a few people get up and go, but everyone just were kind of like sitting there just trying to absorb what had happened. Which is the kind of I mean, again, I'm not spoiling anything, but like it's one of those movies that's so impactful when you finish it, you can't not go away and not try and think about it and but there were two, I've got to tell you the story. There were two girls in their mid-20s sitting in the back row, and they were just talking up a storm as soon as the credits had kind of like come up. They would chat. Right. And then laughing their heads off. They were laughing like, and as I left and I walked behind them, one of the girls said, "That was the best 20 quid I have ever spent." Right? So I was
really?
like, I've got to tell them. They had such a blast. And they we stayed right to the very, very end. People started leaving. And then I was there with a few of our kind of like old school friends. And we were kind of like looking at each other and laughing and smiling and chatting. And then these other girls were the last to leave as well. And they were still in the cinema when we left, laughing and talking about the movie. So if that isn't an endorsement, I don't know what is.
That's good to hear. That is good to hear. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Well, so yeah, I think we'll obviously, this is, it's going to be a big deal. It's a big release. It's going out across like most of the countries in the world, I'm guessing. So,
well, I mean, it's weird because it's not like when something lands on Netflix, pretty much everyone can go and see it. Whereas this rights have been sold all over the world to this place, that place, or the other. But like I say, I think middle of March to the end of March, I think most people in the world will get an opportunity to rent it or download it or whatever. So you should be getting a lot more eyes on it between now and then. And I'm just fascinated to know what people, particularly people outside the UK and Ireland,
think of it.
Well.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is of course, we spent a year doing the podcast, and we did we had a year of build up and anticipation to us writing this book, releasing Back to Reality. Yeah. That was season 1 of the podcast for anyone who's joining us this week. But Unwelcome actually has probably been, I'm thinking 2-3 years since
at least,
we started talking about it.
Well, we finished shooting it just 2.5 years ago.
2.5 years ago. So it's been 3 years. So this is like 3 times the intensity that's been built. So, but I love it, and you've knocked it out of the park. Seriously, I just think it is such a brilliant bit of movie, and it's not just well, there's so many things to talk about with it, but I've got to say, for me, one of the most amazing moments was, and again, no spoilers, but that you've got to just, if you get a chance to see it in the cinema, if you're in the US, get a chance to see it in the cinema, or if you've got like one of those ridiculously massive TVs, which I know a lot of people do, you'll also get this at home. The cinematography is absolutely like, terrific. If you like Ireland, like seriously, the Irish Tourist Board should be sponsoring the movie up to about halfway, and then.
Well, our cinematographer is a guy called Hamish Doyne-Ditmas, who is terrific, and he went to great lengths to get old lenses. These are old lenses that still have lead in them, because you can't do that anymore. Any new lenses, the lead isn't in there, but the lead gives it a kind of old school look, and it gives it a kind of 70s, 80s horror movie look to it that you don't get now with modern lenses. And he was very particular about getting these. And we were lucky because we were one of the first productions to sort of come out of lockdown. So we had kind of had our pick of the lenses and the equipment and crew as well. We got some amazing crew. So, it does look really, it's got, and again, because of the way we shot the film, a lot of it is, we're inside, but it looks outside. So it has this kind of heightened Hammer horror, Tim Burton, Terry Gilliam kind of look to it, intense colors, and it's almost like a fairy tale. So it's got a very unique look. We love it.
Absolutely brilliant. And I will also say this as well. because a lot of people don't know this, but if you're into Game of Thrones, there's a whole other like Easter egg game that you can play of like how many Game of Thrones actors you can find in Mark's movie, because I'm a massive Game of Thrones fan, and I was just like, wow, this is like an absolutely amazing cast
we did
as well.
We cast
genuine Irish actors. I think it's one of John's, because John is from Belfast, and it's one of his bugbears when you see films set in Ireland and they've got English actors doing Irish accents or whatever. So he wanted to, which is why my one line in the film was cut, because my Irish accent wasn't up to snuff. I had a line and it got cut. So
thank you very much.
But yeah, well, you will get to see a little bit of Mark in the movie if you keep an eye out for that. People, of course, are interesting. I bet you there's people out there who maybe listened to the podcast for years, but maybe have never watched it on other podcasts on YouTube, or maybe even seen a picture of us, right? Because I always remember with the radio DJs, I always used to have this weird kind of like imaginary, what do these voices, what do they look like? And you get a very solid like Pat Sharp. It's bizarre. Going back, Capital FM. I'm real 80s kids, but when I saw what he looked like, I'm like, that is nothing like I imagined in my head.
Really?
So I wonder how many people like might hear you. Well, we'll see. We'll see. So if you're not in one of the kind of major like movie releases places like Canada, America, Australia, the UK, let us know if you see the movie come out on streaming places, and we can share the word as well through that, because this is something we'll be talking about a little bit going forward as well. So it'll be fun to hear, because we've got listeners all over the world. Like, how many countries was it? About 90 countries or something?
Everywhere, and I know we've got listeners in Nepal and places like that. So if you're in Nepal and you manage to catch me at the flicks, I'd love to hear about it.
Completely, yeah. So crazy places where you watch the movie would be a fun little theme to have. But
definitely.
Brilliant. Well, listen, talking about knocking it out of the park, we've knocked it out of the park again this week with our special guest, haven't we, Mark? Tell us about the return of one of our very early guests from the first season.
We welcome back Mark Edwards, who was on episode 35, back when it was just with double figures. Do you remember those heady days? And I'll put that a link in the show notes to that. That was recorded in May 2017, when he'd sold a mere 2 million copies of his books. Well, Mark writes psychological thrillers, and he's now sold more than 4 million copies of his books now, I think, and he tops the bestseller list many, many times. And it's now 10 years since his first solo novel, The Magpies, and we talk about that. We also discuss why the themes of some books work better than others, about building a relationship with your readers, and why there are times when he feels like Radiohead.
Brilliant. So let's dive in and listen to the other two Marks chatting. Absolutely lovely Mark Edwards.
Mark Edwards, welcome back to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. I can't believe it. I think it was 7 years ago that I was on here last. 6 or 7 years ago? 6 years ago.
We spoke to you May 2017, so almost 6 years ago. Incredible stuff.
Crazy. You've been doing this all that time.
Well, and you've been doing this all that time as well. I mean, here's the thing. We were talking, and listeners, I'll put a link in the show notes. You can check this out, because the episode was called The Incredible Tenacity of Mark Edwards. And talking about tenacity, took you 17 years to get a book deal, and you're still here.
15 years. Yeah, I know. I know. So it's 10 years now since I published The Magpies, which is my first solo book, and it's 12 years overall since I got my first deal when I was writing with Louise Voss. So yeah, it's 12 years, and I've been doing it full time as my only job, my only source of income for a decade. Yeah. So
well,
amazing.
I don't want to repeat too much of what we went over the first time round, but I mean, talk about tenacity. I do want to talk about it a bit, because, it was submitted and rejected back in 2000. So actually it's a bit older than 10 years old, isn't it? It's, and then, you had an agent, then you lost an agent, and then you quit for a few years. So Magpies was a big turning point for you. How are you celebrating?
It was. Well, so this April, in fact, is the 10-year anniversary of that book being published. And originally I self-published it before it was picked up by Thomas and Mercer later that year. So I am going to have a big party on my Facebook page, as is traditional with me. I've been doing those. I've been doing those for 10 years now. And they used to just be text, but now they're video.
Text. Oh my! So I'm trying to imagine that text-only parties on Facebook. What a world!
I know. We were just typing stuff. There would be photos as well, but it was mainly text. And then about 5 years ago, or maybe even longer, I went over to video. But I know it seems so strange now that I would just be sitting there typing furiously all evening. So I'll be having a party, and then so in the years since I last spoke to you, I published 2 short sequels to the Magpies, 2 novellas,
right?
Murder of Magpies and Last of the Magpies. So they came out in 2018 and 2019 and did pretty well. And they've only ever been available as ebooks and audiobooks. And over the years, I've had so many people write to me saying, I don't read ebooks, and I want to read these as in print. And I only actually realised a couple of years ago that I still owned the print rights to those books. Right. I thought that my publisher had got all of the rights, but had chosen not to create paperbacks of them. And then I looked at my contract, and it suddenly dawned on me that they'd only bought the e and audio rights. So I thought, right, I'm gonna publish them myself. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm tying it into the 10-year anniversary. I'm being entrepreneurial still and bringing them out myself. And we're going to there'll be a standard paperback edition, and then there'll be a limited edition kind of box set with some other goodies that I'm pulling together to celebrate the anniversary of the Magpies. So yeah, there'll be lots going on my social media over that month, and hopefully it will kind of get people excited, and kind of the idea is to get people to remember like why they started reading my books in the first place, and kind of in the lead, because the last few books that I've written have been set in America. Mm-hmm. And I kind of moved away from the domestic suspense, the domestic noir stuff that I was best known for, because I just wanted to kind of spread my wings a bit and try some new stuff. So I wrote The Hollows, which was set in Maine on a campsite. So that was kind of like my Stephen King tribute.
Right.
And I wrote No Place to Run, which was a more of an Linwood Barclay-esque action with people running around the forests of California. And then there was The House Guest before that, which was in New York. And so my new book, Keep Her Secret, which comes out at the end of May, is my return to the UK, my return to domestic noir. And and it ties in nicely. I mean, I didn't plan this, it's coincidence that it ties in with the 10-year anniversary of the Magpies. So by kind of celebrating that, I'm trying to kind of remind people why they started reading Mark Edwards books back in the day.
Back in the day. Right, there's a lot to unpack there. You know, there's Magpies, and then there's the entrepreneurial thing, and then there's writing in the States and coming back here. And I want to talk about all of those. But the Magpies, I'm wondering what your relationship with the Magpies is, because for a lot of people, it might be the first book they read of yours. It might be their favorite book, because this is something that I think rankles with a lot of authors. People will say, oh, that first book you wrote, that's my favorite. And you're sitting there thinking, well, you know, I'm not exactly chopped liver since, you know. I mean, like, so what's your relationship with the book like The Magpies?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just wrote a very long afterword to the new paperback, and I've covered this topic in that, like my relationship with the book, because first of all, it changed my life, that book. So I have a very positive relationship with it, because it was the book that allowed me to become a full-time writer. And if you go back and listen to my first interview with you in 2017, you'll see that I'd kind of really been in the doldrums and things have been going badly with my traditional deal. And the Magpies kind of rescued me financially, and also
paid a tax bill, didn't it?
Professionally. I had a terrible, huge tax bill that it helped me pay off. And then it paid for my wedding, and it kind of launched me as a it gave me the confidence to go full time and give up the day job, the freelance work that I was doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really positive, and it is also great that people still enthuse about it. So when I announced that I was bringing out the sequels as a paperback, that in the last few days on Facebook and Instagram and so on, the excitement has been really high. Even people who've kind of read them already as ebooks. Any mention of the Magpies, people get really excited, which is great. However, I feel a little bit like Radiohead must feel when people shout, "Play Creep," because they've obviously gone on and created all these great masterpieces and works of art and honed their craft, as have I believe. And I think that my later books are much more skillfully written, and they're more polished, and they've got big twists that I really laboured over, and the Magpies, I didn't even really have a twist. It kind of just the twist is that there is no twist, I think, in that book.
Clever.
That's not a spoiler. So it's kind of frustrating in a way that when I do a poll on my social media and I say, "What's your favorite of my books?" it's nearly always the Magpies that comes out on top. It's either that one or Follow You Home.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is that I really love the characters, and I think that the Magpies had a kind of X factor that, even though it wasn't polished, and maybe in fact because it wasn't polished, and there's some crazy stuff happens in it, like the flat gets invaded by spiders and things that I might now think, that's just too far-fetched. people really remember that scene and really love it, and various other scenes in there. It just struck a chord with lots of people because of the Neighbours from Hell thing that so many people have had that experience of. I mean, a similar book was Here to Stay with the In-Laws from Hell. Like, lots of people could identify with that as well. Yeah. when you strike on one of those themes that's universal, those books always do better than the ones that are a little bit more out there. So yeah, the characters, Lucy Newton, who's the main baddie in the Magpies, she made cameo appearances in like the next 4 or 5 books. There'd always be little mentions of her, like what was happening with her court case or where she was. I just really love writing her, and I love writing the main characters as well, Jamie and Kirsty. So writing those sequels was a lot of fun. And I mean, this is an exclusive, actually. I've just written a new short story starring Lucy.
Okay.
Yeah, so that will be in the paperback, at the back of the paperback, as a special bonus.
Fantastic.
For people who've already got the ebook, it will give them a reason to want to buy the paperbacks. It's got a 6,000-word short story about Lucy.
Brilliant.
I mean, she's probably my most valuable IP, if I was.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I remember talking to you about this previously, in that you don't have a Jack Reacher character that crops up in every book. You've sustained this incredible. What are we up to? 18, 19 novels now, or
if you include the books with Louise, it will be 19.
And most of them are standalones, essentially, aren't they? So
there's some that kind of come in pairs.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a couple of Louise and I started 2 series that both kind of petered out after 2 books,
right?
And we just moved on to do other things. But all of my solo novels, apart from the Magpies trilogy, which includes the 2 novellas, they're all standalones. And those novellas aren't included in that 19. So on top of the 19 novels, there's like three novellas and various short stories and things as well.
Looking back, and I'm guessing the answer is going to be no, but I should ask, looking back, do you kind of think your life might have been easier if you'd come up with a Jack Reacher character, someone who's cropping up in every book, or do you like the freedom to do, a Stephen King style novel, a Linwood Barclay style novel, and hop around like that?
I do. Well, I mean, it's swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Because I like the freedom. I like to be able to create a new story each time, and to be able to kind of move around between subs. They're not different genres, but they're different subgenres.
Yeah.
And however, it means that with every book, you've got to create a whole new set of characters, a whole new setting, and kind of. Although I would say that most of my books have a central male protagonist who is quite similar to me, probably.
An everyman. Let's call him an everyman.
An everyman, yeah, an every mark. So it's good and bad, and also I think the great, commercially speaking, the great thing about standalones is that each one has a chance to kind of shine on its own. Whereas I feel that with series, I know that as a reader, if kind of it's book 8 in a series comes out and I think, oh, that sounds really good, I'm put off by the fact that I haven't read books 1 to 7, and I think, well, am I going to have to go back and read book 1? There are lots of authors who I feel like are kind of, it's so late now to get on board, without having that huge commitment of going back and reading all of the early books in the series. So although there are some, I've been reading the Bosch series, for example, for 20, 30 years, however long it's been going. And there's a couple of other series that I really love, and I buy them like as soon as they come out. But I generally read standalones as well, because I just find it, because I get sent so many books and I read so much, and there's so many new authors coming along and all the time, that I find series hard to commit to. So I always worry with series that it's going to be diminishing returns, that that each book is going to sell a little bit, as they sell fewer than the previous one, which is what happened with the 2 series that Louise and I tried to launch. Was that the second book didn't sell as many, and I just thought, well, what's the point in carrying on with this? And I know that you're meant to hit a point where suddenly, if they all rise, and people are constantly going back and buying your backlist, which is what happened with Ian Rankin, for example.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't start a series. In fact, the book that I'm writing now, so the next novel, 2024's novel, also brings back an old character from one of my previous books as one of the 2 central protagonists. I'm not going to announce what that is yet, though. Who it is. But it is, it's fun for me to go back and kind of reacquaint myself with those characters, because there are some that I've just really enjoyed writing, and you just find yourself slipping back into their voice.
Yeah.
So I can see how you could become bored if you were writing the same character over and over. So maybe just kind of having that universe and bringing them back kind of sporadically is what works best for me. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, setting books in the States as well. So like The Hollows, you were saying that you set it in Maine. How were you doing in the States before that? Was that an attempt to sort of crack America, so to speak? Because I was talking to Ben Aronovich about this the other night, and he was saying, I've struggled with it too. I feel like Cliff Richard, that will never crack America.
Yeah. Well, so I had one huge book in America, which was Follow You Home.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to number 2 on the Kindle chart, and it sat at number 2 for a long time, and it sold like 750,000 copies or something ridiculous.
Wow.
Because if you can crack America, you can shift big numbers.
Mm.
And it was only The Girl on the Train that kept it off number 1, which was quite frustrating. But so yeah, that was God, how long ago was that? 2015. And then Here to Stay also did well in America.
Mm-hmm.
But then the rest of them have kind of they've been so-so, I'd say, the sales over there. And I was never sure whether that was because they were too English. Because Follow You Home was set partly in Romania. And I thought, and Here to Stay was set partly in France, and thought maybe having like the international setting, rather than it just being set in the UK, helps the sales in the States. So I thought, right, I'm going to commit. You know, like when a band, I always use music.
I love it.
Analogies. When a band gets in the back of a transit van and tours America and tries to crack America, like, I mean, Coldplay are big in America, so they basically put the work in and just went around America for years playing gigs, or U2 or something like that. That's how you crack America. I thought, right, I'm going to really commit to it. I'm not going to get in a transit van and drive around America, but I'm going to set 3 books there in a row. I'm not just going to set one book there and see what happens. I'm going to really go for it. And actually, it hasn't really made any difference to my sales in the States. I'd say it hasn't made any. In fact, they've all sold differing, and those 3 books have all sold different numbers. And it's just really hard to see a pattern. I definitely haven't seen like, 3 books in America, my sales in America have gone up. It just didn't really do anything. So and in fact, it's upset some of my British fans,
right? Yeah,
because they want me to set books in England.
And I guess you are testament that you don't have to crack America. You know, there are enough readers in the UK and Europe or what have you, that or Oz or Canada, who are quite happy with UK set thrillers. So, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does, like I said, it like with Follow You Home and Here to Stay, they sold lots of copies because they did so well in America, and that's great, and the money was incredibly useful. But yeah, still the majority of my sales are in the UK. My fan base is still mostly in the UK, and so I also, you could say that I didn't really commit to the America thing because they were all about British protagonists in America.
Right. Okay.
So I never wrote them from an American character's point of view. Although there are point of views in all of those books from American characters.
Yeah.
So I was basically writing in American English for those chapters, although still with British spelling. I mean, it was a little bit of a hybrid of British and American. Yeah, I mean, maybe if I'd done what's his name, Adrian McKinty, he's Northern Irish, but he wrote The Chain and the book after that. Kind of, he really went for it and wrote them as American novels, and Steve Kavanagh does the same.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah.
Then I don't know. I just thought that was too much of a kind of change.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm basically the next from now on. I might set the occasional thing in America in the future, but I'm coming back to Britain and staying here for the foreseeable future, definitely.
Wonderful stuff. I want to talk about that entrepreneurial thing, then we'll get into a couple of listening questions in a minute. But because I've got here my hot little hands, look, a copy of Sweet Meat, which is limited edition, and it's signed by your fair hand. It's number 54 of 500.
Okay, that's a good one.
And listeners, if you're looking at the YouTube version of this, you'll see behind Mark, there's a table, there's some Jiffy bags. You were talking about doing a special kind of box set for Magpies and special editions and what have you. We're seeing more and more authors doing their own signed limited editions, direct sales. When did you start doing this? Is it working for you? Is it something you're going to be doing more of? And is it a massive, do you end up in a room full of books with Jiffy bags and sticky tape? And...
Yeah, well, all of those things. It was, I had this novella that I'd written called Sweet Meat, Sweet Meat was a book within a book in my novel, The Retreat.
Yeah.
So that's about a horror writer who'd had a big hit with a book called Sweetmeat. And I decided that I wanted to write that story, but write a shorter version of it. I mean, I can write a 25,000 word novella in 2 or 3 weeks. I find it really easy to write novellas.
Right.
If I could only write novellas, I would be very happy. Because for me, it's the perfect length to tell a good story, but without all of the complexities of novels. So if I could write 4 novellas a year for the rest of my life, I would be very, very happy. But unfortunately, the market doesn't really work like that. But you can put these novellas out as extras for the kind of like the hardcore readers. So I just did 500, and I wanted it to be a beautiful object as well, because
it is,
because it fulfills a need in me that isn't fulfilled by ebook publishing. Because most of my sales are in ebook, and they do come out in paperback as well, but there's something about having a hardback and a beautiful kind of limited edition book with end papers and a dust jacket and the kind of the foil stamping underneath the dust jacket so I wanted to create something really beautiful that I would personally kind of treasure. So I hired an illustrator who is very, very talented, and so she did all the illustrations inside the book as well. And then I just sold them directly to my readers on my Facebook page and on my mailing list, and it crashed my website. When I launched it, it crashed my website. When the website went down, I did it on a live Facebook party, of course.
Right.
I was like, go. I was like, okay, go. And like within 30 seconds, the website crashed and everyone was like freaking out, panicking that their order hadn't gone through So I was then sitting there for an hour, like people saying, "Is mine gone through? Is mine gone through?" And me trying to check the orders. It was a customer service nightmare. Even though my web host had assured me that this wouldn't happen.
They always do that.
I know. So I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, it's quite exciting to say that you crashed your website because there was so much demand.
Yeah.
But they sold out like immediately. And it was great. I mean, I think I charged £20 for each one. And then I paid my 15-year-old daughter to stuff the envelope. Gave her some money to do that. But then I had to like print out all the labels and stick them on and put them in postage bags and organize all of that. And it was very time consuming. And then I had to deal with like the ones that went missing in the post. And so I had to keep a few back. So I knew that would happen, that some would get damaged or go missing. Luckily, it was very few actually that disappeared, got bashed up. Like the occasional one where the jiffy bag would come ripped open. It looked like a dog had eaten the book.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it was great. It was really good fun, and I do like doing the entrepreneurial stuff where you're selling directly to readers, and so that's why I'm going to do the same with the Magpies sequels paperback as well. But I'm going to do it on a site. I'm going to create more of them. I'm doing 2,000.
Wow. Okay.
Because it's a paperback, I can sell it a bit cheaper.
Yeah.
Because the printing cost is a lot less. So I didn't make loads of money off Sweetmeat because the costs were actually really high. The costs of the printing and the illustrations and then my time as well, and the amount I had to pay my daughter to stuff the envelopes.
that was the big cost.
Yeah. It wasn't like a huge, and it was low volume as well. It was only 500, so it wasn't a big money spinner, but it was good fun, and it kind of was a good test case to see whether people would buy stuff direct from me. Yeah. And so I'm now creating this list of like the absolute kind of my kind of hardcore customers, the people who I know are willing to buy kind of like premium books directly from me, rather than just like a 99p ebook that they might buy from Amazon. I mean, you can sell ebooks direct to customers as well now using things Book Funnel, which I'm quite interested because. So I haven't brought out the ebook of Sweet Meat yet.
Right.
So I'm thinking of doing that. So later this year, I think I might launch it directly just from my website first, which allows me to sell it a little bit cheaper because I'll be getting like 100% of the money, not having to give a big chunk to Amazon.
Or your daughter or Jiffy Bags,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and you are, so one of the questions that you asked me in 2017 was whether I had a mailing list, whether I'd got an email list when I started. And because I used to work in email marketing, and when I started in 2011, I neglected to set up an email mailing list. I rectified that. So I've now got like 20,000 people on an email list.
Wow.
So, and that is, to any author listening, that is my most valuable asset, really, is that email list. And my Facebook page as well, still. Because Facebook is still so good for this demographic.
Yeah.
I'm not on TikTok yet.
Right. No, it's like I said, the mailing list thing is all because Facebook, when we spoke, 6 years ago or whatever, Facebook seemed like it was here to stay, but who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's around the corner? It's because you can't be too reliant on that, because you never know what Facebook are going to do, or whether people are going to migrate to a different platform. So I think you do have to spread yourself across a few different platforms, but that email list, that's mine, and yours, even if MailChimp, which is the one that I use, even if MailChimp went bust, I can still download that list, and they're my contacts. So I think that's really, really important to have that direct line to your readers. So I like having a mix of. I can't see myself going purely back to self-publishing and selling direct to customers. I can't. I wouldn't want to do that, but I like having it as a kind of side hustle. And it's not. And I'm not just doing it for I'm not just doing it for money. I'm doing it because I really enjoy doing it. I like to put things out that my publisher might not want to do, or because they only really want to do novels. It allows me to get things out to people in interesting formats, different stories, different material. And just the fact that we've got this freedom to do this now, whereas it used to be seen as vanity publishing years ago, I think is great. So it's the only issue really is time, and the time it takes to write those books, and all the work that goes into producing them. Yeah, indeed. I mean, I've just been sitting downstairs ordering cardboard boxes and trying to work out the cost per unit of cardboard boxes. And it's kind of boring, but essential, that part of it. Absolutely. I got a couple of listed questions. Okay. First one's from Andrew Guile, who says, what's it like being with an Amazon imprint, and would you recommend it to others? And he says that this might be a daft question, bearing in mind he sold 4 million books, but you were Thomas and Mercer. What I will say, I do know, and not mentioning any names, I do know managers of bookstores who will turn their nose up at Amazon imprints because they're seen as the big bad. Has that? But obviously, you're selling books like the gangbusters, so So that's really the only downside of being with Amazon. Is that it is quite hard to get your books into shops. My local Waterstones, after 10 years, has just started stocking my books.
And they
10
did that
years.
because a reader of mine was harassing them on Twitter to do it. And it's great. They did it. I'd given up. I'd given up going in there because it was just got embarrassing. I was just like, well, fine, whatever. I mean, I go to that shop all the time and buy books, and my books are in there. And I just kind of had to just swallow it. And I'm also doing a big event. I mean, it will have been and gone by the time this goes out, but I'm doing a big event in Waterstones, Islington with Lisa Jewell at the end of February.
Right.
Which is great because 5 years ago, they wouldn't, if I was doing a festival and Waterstones were providing the books, they refused to sell my books. They refused to put them on the table with the other authors because they'd kind of gone through that thing where they were selling Kindles. So they were kind of in with Amazon, and then they just went completely the other way.
Yeah.
We're having a complete break from anything to do with Amazon. And it's thawed a bit now. And I'm also starting to get festival appearances and things that previously seemed to be closed to Thomas and Mercer authors. So I've kind of done all of the big crime festivals in the UK now, and I've got more this year, which is fantastic. So I love doing that.
That's good.
But yeah, I mean, if you want to sell ebooks, there is no better publisher than Thomas and Mercer.
Yeah,
for crime, and they've got their other imprints for romance and science fiction and so on. And in terms of the editorial and the design and all the other stuff that publishers do, they're brilliant. They're exactly the same as any other publisher.
Yes,
the editorial process is really rigorous. And I think they create great book covers. They're really nice to work with. They're very collaborative. They listen to your opinions, and but they're the same as any other publisher. Some authors do really, really well with them, and some authors don't do as well. And it's not like you sign with them and you're guaranteed to sell huge numbers. It's the same as any other publisher. Just that they have that kind of because they're kind of slightly separate to the rest of Amazon, but they have that relationship with them where they can like use their email lists and so on. That really, really helps. So yeah, I'm always recommending Thomas Mercer to other authors because I'm constantly getting asked by other authors, "Oh, what's it like being with Thomas and Mercer?" And I will get direct messages or phone calls from authors that I know who've been with traditional publishers saying, "Well, I've had an offer from Amazon. Can you tell me what they're like?"
Yeah.
I feel like I should take a commission off of all these authors. There's been so many over the years.
I got a question from Kate Baker, who says that she first met, and there's air quotes around that, met you at one of the Fiction Cafe live sessions, possibly in 2018. She said you had great fun, what with the cat and Poppy pulling names from the hat to win prizes. Now, Kate herself has a Fiction Cafe live thing coming up. That's coming on the Sunday, 5th of March, which is actually after this episode goes out. But Kate is a Patreon supporter, so I'm going to do a little clip and send it to her before this episode comes out. Okay. So she's asking, do you have any advice for doing a Fiction Cafe live, and just generally advice for live events online anyway?
Oh, for advice, I mean, just be yourself. Try and be. I mean, if you're funny, try and be funny. If you're, just be enthusiastic. Don't be too salesy. Just answer people's questions and chat with the readers, and just try and be natural. I personally find it I'm quite comfortable in front of the camera and chatting to people. Keep an eye on the comments, see what people are saying, respond to the comments, call people by their name when they leave a comment or when they address you. I always start my Facebook events by kind of doing a roll call of who's here and reading and saying the names because for me it's like a big extended family, because whenever I do these things I see the same people. They come back. I had the same people coming back for 10 years now to every event that I've done. which I really love. And I kind of, I feel like I've built a relationship with these readers, and they'll come to my events and I might meet them in real life. And yeah, just be nice, really, is the, kind of, the main
best advice.
Don't get grumpy and refuse to answer questions, and don't be pretentious.
Wonderful advice. It's good advice. So, Mark, thanks so much for coming back. We've talked about what's coming, so keep her secrets coming, and there are more novels on the way, special editions. It sounds. Yeah. I mean, you're kind of living your dream, aren't you? I mean, this is what you'd always wanted, wasn't it? I mean,
yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, it took me so long to get here that it tastes so sweet once to achieve something that's very hard to achieve. So there was 2 achieves in that sentence. I would edit that if it's written down.
There's an author. There's an author. Well, look, let's get you back. Let's not leave it so long next time. I'd love to get you back on the podcast at some point.
Yes.
But it's been an absolute joy speaking to you. And
thank you for having me back on.
Absolute pleasure. So take care and speak to you again soon.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh, you know, Mark, when we interviewed Mark the first time round back in the first year of the podcast, it was one of my favorite interviews. Absolutely inspiring. Lovely guy as well.
Lovely guy, yeah.
He deserves every success he's got. But, you know, it's amazing to think, isn't it, back in the day that he did text-only parts.
Text-only part? It blows my mind, of course. You know, there wasn't the video streaming stuff that we have now. And it made me think as well, because when I was at Orion, one of my accounts was Waterstones, and we used to do Twinterviews, which were text-only, which were text-only interviews on Twitter. I remember one memorable night doing one with Barry Humphries, who was in character as Dame Edna Everage. And I tell you, half the stuff was, you just would, even then on Twitter, you just wouldn't put it out there, instantly cancelled. It was such a funny, very, very funny man, Barry Humphries. So yeah, this whole kind of text thing was really big then. But this is the thing with Mark, he's always been at the forefront of this kind of online thing, but also having that direct relationship with his readers, which is so important to nurture. And this is why he's got such a loyal fan base, because they feel like they're on the journey with him. And it's such an important lesson, I think, to learn. And I know he's got this thing with Facebook, but we'll talk about this in the extended one as well. You know, the email list and all that kind of thing. It is important, but yeah, God, text only Facebook. Imagine.
I know. It's like CFAX for anyone outside of England that doesn't remember might not know CFAX. CFAX was you used to get it with a special button on your massive
poor man's internet.
Poor man's internet. Yeah. We actually used to book holidays. Do you remember you?
Yes, yeah, you did. And gig tickets, used to get gig tickets on there, you know? Yeah.
And the classic one, all my friends, it was like the sports scores. So they would live update when Liverpool scored, and you just literally just be staring at the screen waiting for something to happen. It was quite amazing, but yeah.
Or it would cycle round and you'd be sitting there waiting for that page to come round again.
Yeah, you couldn't. Yeah, it was a bit like kind of, I guess it was like the tape player of back in the day. You have to wait for it to finish with no fast forward button as well. But I think it's really important, whatever way. I mean, I know when you think about what Mark's achieved in his career, a lot of that success has come from building a really core loyal fan base. And you do hear about this over and over. I mean, you hear about these, you know, there's people out there who talk about, oh, you need 500 raving fans or 500 real fans, or, but there's this idea that I think we get a little bit too hung up on this premise that in order to sell a lot of books like Mark has, we need to have, mailing lists of millions or Facebook groups or Facebook pages with like 100,000 followers. We don't. If you've got that massive early engaged group of a small group of people, they do so much of the work for you in terms of getting that word of mouth out there. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the extended, because we're going to dive into a bit about email lists, which is obviously a huge part. And I know a lot of people struggle with that, but let's talk now, Mark, about series and standalone, because this is really fascinating, because one of the things that we've discussed a lot with a lot of authors over the years is the benefits of series. I know that you're fully embraced that, and you're on book 5 now, aren't you, of your series?
Not quite. I've delivered book 4. Book 5 I'll be writing late this year. But yeah,
right,
absolutely.
Yeah. So on to book 5. So you've had experience with series. We talked to some, massively successful authors like Shannon Mayer, where series is a big part of what she does. But it's so fascinating to find that here we've got Mark Edwards, who still is looking at the standalone, and he made some really valid points, didn't he, about the value of standalone versus series.
Yeah, and he really does buck the trend, I think, and I think it speaks to how his readers view him as well. They've come to trust him, and he was talking about this idea of reminding people why they like reading your books in the first place as well. About sort of just checking in on yourself and not getting too self-obsessed or carried away or blinkered to what readers like and what they enjoy. And again, it comes back to this thing of you get that kind of honest feedback and constructive feedback and helpful feedback if you have a close relationship with your readers. And so it's I think people come back for him and his voice and the fact that he writes these great, engaging, twisty-turny stories. So in a way, he is the brand rather than the character being the brand. And there's, there aren't many authors that Neil Gaiman, does that. There aren't. Joanne Harris, I think, is up there as well. So it's Gillian Flynn. So there aren't, Stephen King. There aren't many authors who become bigger than maybe the character, I think.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Although it's interesting as well to look at, he referenced Linwood Barclay, who we've had on the show before as well. And
yes, Linwood.
And they do create, and Mark did say this as well, is that there is a world that's being created, even though it's not the same world every book, but there are characters who kind of drop in and out. Yeah. So I think what I took away from that is, regardless of whether you're going standalone or series, I think it's good to have some kind of weaving of characters, a little bit of tapestry. Linwood Barclay does it. He sometimes, Linwood sets a lot of his books in the same location. And so people naturally kind of come in and out because they might be bystanders in one book. They might be the main character in another. But it's this idea of having this kind of tapestry of a world where you don't know if at any point someone might come in. And so there is that kind of link. It's a way of kind of like either loosely linking books together or obviously linking them together in a series. But so I think that for me is core. And like you say, the most important thing ultimately, and it's proof in, with Mark and many other authors, it really, really does come down to, does the reader want to read you, your book, your voice? That's ultimately, whether it's series or standalone, that is ultimately what they're buying into, and what will keep them coming back for more.
Absolutely. And the thing that Mark and Linwood and people like that are doing when they bring little characters in like this, they are rewarding the long-term reader without burdening them with doing a load of homework or having to remember anything. It's just like a little pleasant moment of delight. It's so-and-so from that other book. I like that. That's good fun. Elmore Leonard used to do that as well. Now I think about it, he'd have characters come in and out of his books. So there's no, you don't feel like you have to have read an encyclopedia to enjoy it. It's just a little moment of delight, and I think that's it's done with the light touch. That's really cool. I think this is why people are the whole Marvel bandwagon is starting to come off the rails a bit. Because they're seeing the box office, some of their movies, and it's like because so much of it's on TV now, and it's become this big kind of bloated soap opera. And when you sit down to watch a movie, it's like, well, have I watched this series and this movie and this movie? Do I need to watch these to make sense of it? And then the thing that was key to drawing you in is now becoming a barrier. And I think one of the things I've heard from authors that write series is every few books, give people an in point. Give people, write something that's the equivalent to a standalone so people can come in again and just enjoy it from that point. And it's something that's very much on my mind at the moment because, like I say, I've just written book 4. I'm about to do book 5. And I don't want it to become so convoluted and complex that new readers will be baffled by what they're reading. It's interesting because my editors, I've just got notes back on book 4, and she's like, we just need a little couple of things just to let readers know what's come before without bogging the whole thing down, and it's literally just a line or two here or there, nothing major. So it's tricky to pull off, but
it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because like what we haven't discussed in the past, we talked about the value of series. We haven't talked about the challenges of a successful series. And this is a whole different. I mean, what a great problem to have in many ways. But I do think that I think there's two different types of reader as well. I, as a reader, if I knew something was a series, I would always want to start at book 1. It's just how I am. I want to kind of go through it in a chronological order, just because that's how I like to kind of build my knowledge about this world or about this series of books. Whereas other people are quite happy to jump in, and then many times people pick a book up and they start reading it completely unaware that it's part of a series, and they might.
I did that. In fact, listeners, if you go back to our episode with Simon Scarrow about 4 or 5 episodes ago, because he was on book 21 of a series, his Roman Legionnaire series that is hugely successful. And I remember when I was researching the interview, I looked at the reviews and on Goodreads and Amazon, what have you, and there were a number of readers who said, I had no idea this was book 21 in a series. I picked it up, absolutely loved it. So Scarrow has the knack of bringing you into his world without burdening you with, and there are maps at the front, there are character lists, there's a what has gone before kind of thing. I did it. I remember picking up one of Bernard Cornwell's Uther Pendragon books, about King Arthur and what have you, and this was like the 5th book, but I still loved it. Still was that because it was the same character, and there were characters who had been in previous episodes of that saga, if you like, but it was one story told well, had a clear beginning, middle, and end, and you could enjoy it as a standalone. So it's if you can pull that off, I think you're off to the races.
Definitely. Now, the other thing that I thought would be fun to jump into is this idea about Amazon imprints, because I think this is also something that a lot of authors aren't really very aware of. I mean, if you're not signed to an Amazon imprint, or if you've never reached out to one, you might not even be aware that there was such a thing. But it's fascinating how there's this kind of play with, the competition between bookstores, physical bookstores, which to me makes complete sense. I mean, if you've got like, Amazon have changed the face of the book world, literally. They completely changed the direction of it. And so, Amazon are a threat to any traditional bookseller. So it doesn't seem surprising that some of those booksellers aren't too happy about stocking their competitors.
Yeah. And it's, we can debate the rights and wrongs of that. Because it's not fair on an author like Mark Edwards, who writes perfectly wonderful books that should be read by as many people as possible. But I mean, Amazon are seen as the big bad. But if you're an author, as Mark said, great editing, great covers, great marketing. Amazon is an organization that knows a thing or two about digital marketing. So. And how many authors do I know with traditional publishers who are like, I don't get any marketing whatsoever, so it's there is that to consider too. So I think it is changing. As Mark said, he's getting invited to festivals now. He's getting invited to bookshops to do events and what have you. I think, the attitudes are changing. Much like, when we started this podcast, there was still a massive prejudice against self-published authors, and that's changed as well. We've seen that change over the course of the podcast. There's still a stigma there, I think, for certain readers, but you're gonna, these things take time. I mean, we are in a time of incredible change in bookselling and publishing, and we're, as you've mentioned a few times, we're just getting started. 10 years from now, it'll still be very, very different.
Oh, completely. Yeah. We're still in the exploration phase of this new brave new world that we're part of in the world of publishing. So fascinating stuff. So folks, if you would like to join Mark and I in the extended edition of this podcast, we're going to dive in and talk about the importance of success in the US. We're going to also talk about how you do direct sales, something Mark's had a lot of experience and I've had experience of doing as well. And if you're an indie author, you won't want to miss that, because we're going to go deep in and talk a bit about that. We're going to explore the importance of also writing novellas and go a bit deeper as to why novellas are so much easier to write, as Mark Edwards said in his interview. And finally, the big holy grail that every author wants to know about, email lists. Again, Mark and I have had quite a few, and I will say, just drop it in there. I've been doing email lists now for about 25 years. So if you want to kind of share a little bit about how I get 6-figure numbers on email lists, I'm like 20,000, Mark, come on. I'll talk a little bit about that. But as Mark said, it's his most valuable asset. So it's very important to think about if you're at whatever stage of writing. In fact, it's as important to think about when you're starting writing, because you need to have an audience when you finish your book. But we'll go deeper into that. So if you'd like to support this podcast, please pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, where you will get access to the extended edition of this podcast. One thing I forgot to mention, Mark, was Mark Edwards talked about his website crashing when he sold this book. And it reminded me of the time when the opening day when we launched the Academy.
Yeah.
We gave everyone their username and logins, not thinking that we're like having this crowd of people all charging through one door. And it does. It's like unbelievable. Like there's something about trying to time things in a way. And so for anyone out there who's thinking of doing a big push and a big launch, it's really important to spread it out. But anyway, just a little aside there. So Mark, what's happening on social media this week?
All kinds of wonderful good news. Starting over on the Academy, Penny Dean on the Academy, she started a new thread in the forum, Share Your Wins. We have this wonderful forum where people talk about all their good news. Penny says, this morning, I've written those 2 little words on my first draft, the end. I figured out I started working on this idea for NaNoWriMo 2018, so it's been a long time coming, and I'm beyond excited. I'm putting champagne in the fridge for later. It's before 9 a.m. right now, so a bit early. Hey, champagne, whatever. Congrats, Penny. Penny is a regular on my craft coaching sessions, and it's just been wonderful seeing the book finally come together. So congrats, Penny. Great news.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and we celebrated with Penny actually on the life coaching for writers session that we did in the Academy on Monday. And I got to actually speak with Penny directly and say, how does it feel? Like, let's just her face was glowing. She was so excited. I thought, it reminded me, and I want to share this with everyone because it's really important not to forget. And we had a bit of a conversation around this, but it reminded me of the importance of celebrating that moment. It's a huge milestone to get to the end of your first draft. And if anyone else is out there, who's just finished, like, make sure you take time to stop and acknowledge this incredible milestone that you reached, because there's not many people that do it. Like, if you look at it across the world, there's not many people who can say I've even written the first draft of a book. So congratulations, Penny. Absolutely excited, and well done to everyone else who's also coming close to that as well.
Well, here's another milestone from another Academy. Aaron Brooks got in touch, said, hey, gang, a little update. He signed with the agent, Amy Collins. Thank you to Mark Stay and Mark DeVoe for all their support over the years. A new journey begins. Now, Aaron, I mean, I've had the pleasure of working on one of his books, a star in the making, absolute star. And again, perseverance, never giving up when other people might have. Huge congrats to Aaron. This is, like I say, is the next stage, and more good things to come, I think, from him.
And if we rewind quickly, I think a couple of months ago, Aaron won a competition, didn't he? A story competition. And so it just shows, we talk about, trying things out, entering competitions. It gets your name out there. I'm sure that had a lot to do with him landing this incredibly big and exclusive agent. So we can't wait to see how Aaron's journey carries on. So congratulations to you too.
So another milestone. So we've gone from finishing to getting an agent. And then we've got Kate Baker, who is on the podcast pretty much every week now because she is an Academy superstar. But you might remember last week, the week before, we talked about her event at Waterstones in Ipswich. She says, oh my God, I'm just home. I've cotton wool inside of my head from 3 solid hours of chatting and laughing and sharing. And she had an amazing event at Waterstones Ipswich. In fact, a couple of Academates turned up. Jack Harmon, Tracy Montague turned up. She said, finding your tribe takes on a whole new meaning when lovely folk from an online group begin to appear in real life. And Kate, she's also been on BBC Radio. She had this sort of half-hour interview. They have a thing on BBC Radio Suffolk, and she gave the Academy a mention there and the podcast. So huge thanks for that, Kate. We are going to be speaking to Kate in a special Academy All-Stars episode when we can find a slot in her busy diary. Superstar. It's just, wanted everywhere. So yeah, huge congrats. So we've had someone finishing their draft, someone getting an agent, Kate's published, and now she's done an amazing event. So congrats on that, Kate. Here's another milestone, right, from another long-term supporter. Jeevani Cherika, she's on Monday, I'm going to find out whether my novel Playing for Love has won an award or not. And here's one of the first interviews I did about it. And it's episode 367 with Jeev, which I'll put a link into the show notes so you can check that out. So Jeev is, these are the RNA awards that she's alluding to here. Yeah, it is massive. So Jeev is shortlisted, nominated rather, for the Jane Wenham-Jones Award for Romantic Comedy for her novel Playing for Love. So, Jeev, we've got everything crossed for you there. And also another member of the BXP group on Facebook, Lorna Cook, she's up for the Historical Romantic Novel Award for The Dressmaker's Secret. So, massive.
And if Lorna wins that, she's going to have to get a new mantelpiece, I think, because she's won.
Because that'll be her second one, I think.
Yeah, I think she's won a couple, 2 or 3 with the RNA as well. Which, if people, again, if you're not into romance or that's like the RNA is like the big kind of organisation for romance writers. So that's a huge accolade if you get even nominated. So we're celebrating already, but all fingers crossed for both of you in that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So look at those milestones. It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. And also, lovely note from Natalie Perry, writing life hack. She says, I followed Mr. D's advice today and started a new notebook by leaving some pages at the beginning for contents and writing page numbers on every page of the book. 3 pages into the notebook, 2 items on my contents page. I'm already loving how organized it is. Thank you for the tip. You bang on about this a bit.
I do. It's life-changing, folks. It's life-changing. I'm gonna have to bring back the motivational minutes from season 1 at some point, Mark, and pick a new tip each week of life hacks from Mr. D. But that's super. I love to hear like anyone who has success with any of the things we talk about. That really fills me up. I love to hear about people who've taken something on and how it's going to help them. So brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. And if you have any other wins, if you want to celebrate even, the smallest of things, which is a big for you in your life, then please share it with us on the podcast, because we love to share all of this news. And not only will we celebrate with you, but you will be inspiring other people, because I promise you, for everything that you achieve, there's someone out there trying to achieve it. And to hear someone who's done it, it keeps them going and it stops them from giving up even sometimes. So please share your wins. Go along to the website, bestsellerexperiment.com, and click on the contact form and send Mark and I a note.
Yeah, or you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Bestseller Experiment, Twitter and Instagram at BestsellerXP. And if you've enjoyed the show, if you've been inspired by our guests like Mark Edwards and all the other guests we've had on the show, give us a rating, give us a star rating, or subscribe, or pop a review on your podcast catcher. It all makes a big difference, makes us more visible, and helps other writers get their voices heard and make the world a better place. Basically, if you give us a 5-star review, you're changing the world.
There we go.
Yeah, in a nutshell, really. It's that simple, isn't it?
It really is.
We're all searching for the meaning of life, and all it comes down to is a 5-star review.
Given a 5-star review on iTunes.
So thank you, folks. And if you haven't yet heard or started or tried the 200-word challenge, it's our free way of getting started on the habit of writing for a lifetime. So pop along to 200wordchallenge.com and find out more about how you can change and break through with those daily writing habits that we're all desperately trying to do. So folks, have a great writing week. It's been wonderful having you with us again. Thank you so much, Mr. Stay. Thank you to our two podcast editors, JD and Dave. We appreciate all the work you guys put in to make us sound kind of relatively normal.
Lucid.
I know, right? It's an incredible work that they do. And thank you again to everyone for joining us. And we can't wait to be with you next week. So it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.